There are 298 prisoners on death row in the state of Florida. This is part 8 of the series. Alan Cox, 61 years old, 23 years on death row. Thomas Baker was killed and Alan Ward Cox was found guilty and given the death penalty. Cox was a prisoner at the Lake Correctional Institute serving multiple life sentences. He discovered that someone had entered into his personal footlocker and taken $500 on December 20, 1998. Several prisoners testified that Cox told the other inmates that he would give $50 to anyone who would catch the thief. Upon learning the identity of the thief, Cox threatened to murder him and showed no regard for the repercussions. Cox signaled for Thomas Baker to approach him during the inmate's lunch break. He struck Baker, causing him to fall to the ground. Baker fought to remove himself from the assault and insisted on not having taken the $500. Cox then used an ice pick-shaped shank to stab Baker 3 times. He buried the shank in a pipe and ran behind the jail pump building. Thomas Baker ran from the scene to the nearest jail guards after being stabbed. According to him, his assailant was Big Al Ecodorm Quad 3. Baker screamed wildly to the police that he was having difficulties breathing and that he could feel blood filling his lungs. On his way to the hospital, Baker passed away. Medical examiners stated that Baker's lungs and aorta were both punctured by the fatal stab wound. Jeffrey Atwater, 60 years old, 33 years on death row. On August 11, 1989, Jeffrey Atwater was found guilty of killing Ken Smith and given a death sentence. Atwater made an effort to enter the John Knox apartment complex in St. Petersburg, Florida on the day of the murder. He lied to the security guard by claiming to be Smith's grandson and fabricating the reason for his visit. He went to visit Smith's room after entering his flat. Atwater left the apartment after 20 minutes and Smith's body was found the following day. Smith's pockets were turned inside out and all of his money was gone, suggesting that he had also been robbed. Atwater allegedly told multiple others that he killed Smith after the slaying, and he was subsequently detained later that day. There was proof that Atwater searched for Smith for up to 3 days before killing him. Smith had reportedly previously given Atwater money, but because of his dread of him, Smith had pledged never to do so again. A medical examiner testified at the trial that 64-year-old Smith had suffered over 40 knife wounds and there was evidence that he had also been beaten either before or during the murder. Mark Geralds, 56 years old, 33 years on death row. Tressa and Kevin Pettibone's 80-year-old son discovered his mother's body on the kitchen floor on February 1, 1989, after she had been battered and stabbed. Tressa Pettibone suffered 2 deadly stabbings on the left side of her neck and 2 on the right side. These stab wounds matched the weapon that was discovered in the kitchen sink. The victim's head, face, chest, and belly all had bruises and abrasions that were the result of physical trauma, according to the medical examiner. The victim's wrists had been tied with a plastic tie for at least 20 minutes before she passed away. Her car was among the many things from the house that had vanished. Prior to the murder, Geralds, a carpenter, assisted in remodeling the Pettibones' house. Circumstantial evidence linked Geralds to the crime. He pawned jewelry from the Pettibone home that had blood traces that were consistent with Tressa Pettibone's blood type, but inconsistent with Gerald's blood type. He gave the victim's sunglasses to a friend. His shoes were found to be matching the victim's shoes, and Geralds knew that Kevin Pettibone was out of town at the time of the crime. Constantine Photopoulos, 64 years old, 33 years on death row. Photopoulos started an extramarital relationship with Dieter Hunt, a bartender who worked at his establishment in the summer of 1989. On October 20th, Photopoulos and Hunt convinced Kevin Ramsey that he was going to be admitted into a club in order to coax him to a remote shooting range. To stop Ramsey from extorting money from him over his involvement in counterfeiting, Photopoulos planned to assassinate him. If Hunt didn't kill Ramsey, Photopoulos threatened to kill her. Hunt shot Ramsey with a .22 handgun 3 times in the chest and once in the head, while Photopoulos recorded the incident. Ramsey was bound to a tree. Photopoulos put an end to the video recording and used an AK-47 assault rifle to kill Ramsey. In order to obtain the $700,000 in insurance proceeds, Photopoulos then planned to murder his wife, Lisa. To enlist Hunt's assistance in killing Lisa, Photopoulos utilized the videotape of Hunt killing Ramsey. He gave Hunt the order to hire a hitman to murder Lisa. Hunt made 2 attempts to employ a man, but the idea never materialized. Lisa Henderson, a friend of Hunt's, introduced him to Tasia James, her lover, who had been paid $5,000 to assassinate Lisa Photopoulos. Brian Chase was hired to murder Lisa after James' first 2 attempts failed. On November 4, 1989, Chase visited the Photopoulos residence after making multiple fruitless attempts. He shot Lisa once in the head, but she survived the wound. Chase was then repeatedly shot by Photopoulos in an effort to make the murder attempt look like a botched burglary. Police discovered the Ramsey murder videotape, a .22 caliber pistol, and an AK-47 assault weapon when searching the residence. Ronald Clark, 55 years old, 32 years on death row. Ronald Willis was killed on January 12, 1990, and Ronald Clark was found guilty and given the death penalty. John Hatch, a co-defendant, testified during the trial that he and Ronald Clark were traveling to Jacksonville on January 12, 1990. The 2 men were waiting for a ride while shooting at various targets along the highway with Clark's pistol that he had been refurbishing. When Ronald Willis spotted the 2 men, he pulled over and offered to give them a ride. Clark informed Hatch in a hushed voice that he intended to take the truck once he was inside. When Willis got out of the truck after Clark had told him to stop, Clark shot him 7 or 8 times. After shoving Willis's body into the middle seat, Clark started his car and headed for a more distant area. Willis's money and boots were stolen by Clark, who then abandoned the body in a ditch. After dinner, Clark and Hatch visited an ex-girlfriend as they carried out the rest of their plans for the evening. The 2 men came back later to get Willis's body. They brought the body to Nassau County Sound Bridge, where it was weighed before being thrown into the water. Willis's ex-wife didn't start driving around looking for him until she started to worry about his unexpected departure. Clark and Hatch continued to use Willis's stolen truck. When his ex-wife saw his pickup at the hotel, she recognized Clark and Hatch as the drivers. Police were called by Willis's ex-wife, but Clark and Hatch escaped before they arrived. Hatch and Clark escaped to South Carolina. On February 7, 1990, Hatch traveled back to Nassau County, where he was detained while Clark was captured in South Carolina. Michael Griffin, 57 years old, 32 years on death row. On April 27, 1993, Michael Griffin, Samuel Velez, and Nicolas Tarallo made the decision to break into a house. Griffin's father's Cadillac took them from Tarallo's apartment to a Chrysler LeBaron, where they changed cars. The LeBaron, which had been used in earlier break-ins, had been stolen by Griffin before. After looking for a suitable target, the 3 ended up at a Holiday Inn in Newport, Florida, where Griffin had carried out previous successful burglaries. Griffin and Velez broke into a hotel room and took a pocketbook and a cell phone. Griffin and Velez split up the stolen goods while Tarallo drove. The 3 saw a police cruiser as they were leaving the Holiday Inn. Griffin cried out in fear and instructed Tarallo to flee the police car. Officers Martin and Crespo were operating a different police vehicle when they saw the LeBaron and started to follow it. Griffin refused to return to jail and told Tarallo to keep avoiding the police, despite his attempts to pull over. When Tarallo eventually pulled over, Griffin started firing at the police, killing Officer Martin, and the 3 tried to flee. Officer Crespo accepted the surrender of Tarallo and Velez, but Griffin left in the LeBaron and was subsequently caught. David Pittman, 62 years old, 32 years on death row. For the murders of Clarence, Barbara, and Bonnie Knowles, David Pittman was found guilty and given the death penalty. Marie Knowles, a daughter of Clarence and Barbara Knowles, married Pittman. Pittman did not desire the divorce that Marie sought to pursue. Pittman had vowed to hurt Marie and her family during the divorce. On May 15, 1990, early in the morning, witnesses called the fire department to report that Marie's parents, Clarence and Barbara Knowles' house was on fire. Following an investigation, it was determined that the offender had disconnected the phone link before starting the fire and stealing Bonnie Knowles' car afterward. Clarence, Barbara, and Bonnie's bodies were discovered inside the house. All 3 of the victims were said to have died as a consequence of several stab wounds that caused heavy bleeding. Bonnie Knowles' throat had also been cut. Another witness stated that he spotted a car that looked like Bonnie Knowles on the same morning of May 15, 1990, in a ditch by the side of the road close to the Knowles' house. The witness noticed the truck come up next to the car, and it was discovered that it belonged to Pittman. Later, the witness saw the burning car. Pittman was then recognized in a photo lineup by another witness who observed the man fleeing from the flaming car. Pittman confessed to the previously mentioned offenses according to a jailhouse informant's testimony. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.